The frozen clothesline snapped like a rifle shot in the January wind, sending Martha Henderson's carefully pinned bedsheets tumbling into the Iowa snowdrift. She stood there on the back porch, watching 3 hours of wash day work disappear into white powder, her raw hands still clutching the wicker basket. It was 1942, and with 2 sons overseas and a farm to run alone, she didn't have 3 hours to waste on anything. The temperature gauge outside the kitchen window read 8 degrees. The weatherman on the radio that morning had promised a warming trend by Thursday, but Thursday was 4 days away, and the Henderson family needed clean clothes now. Her husband's work shirts hung stiff as boards on the remaining line, frozen solid within minutes of leaving the wringer washer. Touch one and it would crack like thin ice. She retrieved the snow-covered sheets and carried them inside, leaving wet tracks across her kitchen floor. The cast-iron cook stove radiated heat in the corner, and for a moment she considered draping the sheets over chairs around it, like her mother used to do. But she'd tried that last week. The kitchen had turned into a steam bath, moisture condensing on every cold surface. She'd spent an hour that evening wiping down walls and windows, and still woke the next morning to ice formations on the inside of the bedroom window glass. Martha wrung out the sheets again over the kitchen sink, her knuckles white from squeezing, then carried the basket back outside. Maybe if she hung them in the machine shed where the wind couldn't reach them. The shed sat 50 yards from the house, and she broke trail through the snow, her breath coming in clouds. Inside, the old Farmall tractor crouched in the darkness, cold metal smelling of grease and gasoline. She strung a rope between 2 support beams and hung the sheets. An hour later, she checked on them. The sheets hung exactly as she'd left them, frozen into strange sculptural shapes, completely unchanged. The machine shed blocked the wind, but provided no warmth. It was a dead space, an icebox. She took the sheets down and trudged back to the house. Her neighbor Sarah Mitchell had mentioned something last month about drying clothes in her cellar. Martha descended her own cellar steps, pulling the light cord. The earthen-walled room smelled of potatoes and preserves. Jars of tomatoes and green beans lined the wooden shelves her husband had built the summer before Pearl Harbor. It was warmer down here than outside, maybe 40 degrees, but the air felt heavy and still. She hung the sheets on a rope stretched between floor joists. The fabric dripped steadily onto the dirt floor, creating dark puddles. By evening, the sheets were still soaking wet, and the cellar smelled like mildew. She hauled them back upstairs. That night, Martha lay in bed listening to the wind howl around the farmhouse eaves. She'd rewashed the sheets a 3rd time and hung them in the parlor, draped over every chair and the davenport. The house felt clammy, the air thick. She'd opened the parlor window an inch despite the cold, trying to get some air circulation, but moisture was already condensing on the wallpaper. By morning, there would be frost on the inside walls. Tuesday brought no relief. The thermometer read 4 degrees at dawn. Martha had 5 loads of washing to do: bedsheets, towels, her husband's work clothes, her own dresses and undergarments, and the kitchen linens that had piled up over 2 weeks. She couldn't keep putting it off. The family needed clean clothes, but she also couldn't afford to spend every waking hour fighting frozen laundry. She fired up the Maytag wringer washer in the kitchen, feeding hot water from the reservoir on the cook stove. The washing went quickly enough. The wringer squeezed most of the water out, and she caught the damp clothes in a basket as they came through. By mid-morning, she had 3 loads clean and wrung out. But then came the impossible part. She tried hanging the first load on the outdoor lines again, thinking maybe the temperature had risen enough. Within 20 minutes, the clothes were frozen solid, rattling in the wind like wooden chimes. A towel fell off the line and shattered on the frozen ground like a dropped plate. She brought everything in and hung the load in the kitchen. Steam immediately fogged the windows, and condensation began running down the walls. Martha stood in her kitchen surrounded by dripping laundry, feeling the helpless anger that comes from working hard and getting nowhere. This was the kind of problem that ground women down. The endless cycle of washing that never dried, or dried but damaged the house, or dried in the kitchen but made everyone sick from the damp. Her mother had always said February was the hardest month on a farm. Not because of the cold, but because of the relentlessness. The way winter just kept pressing down with no relief. She remembered her grandmother, who'd raised 8 children on a Kansas homestead through winters that made Iowa look soft. Grandma had always had clean clothes on the line, had always smelled like fresh laundry and lye soap. But Grandma had been gone 5 years now, and Martha hadn't thought to ask about winter washing back when asking still mattered. There were 1,000 things she wished she'd asked, and this was just one more. By Wednesday, Martha was desperate. She'd tried everything she could think of. Hanging clothes in every room of the house created so much moisture that ice formed on the interior windows, and the wallpaper began peeling in the bedroom. The cellar method resulted in mildew that wouldn't come out no matter how many times she rewashed. Outdoor drying was impossible in this cold. The machine shed and other outbuildings were no warmer than outside. She even tried the chicken coop, thinking the body heat from 50 laying hens might provide enough warmth. She strung a line above the roosting boxes and hung up a load of towels. The chickens went into a panic, flapping and squawking at the wet fabric dripping over their heads. Her best-laying hen knocked over the waterer in the chaos, and the towels ended up splattered with chicken droppings. They had to be washed again. That afternoon, Sarah Mitchell stopped by with a jar of blackberry preserves. She found Martha in the kitchen, surrounded by laundry draped over every surface, the windows fogged completely white. Sarah took one look and said, "What would we do without electric dryers?" Martha almost laughed. Electric dryers cost $200, and the Henderson farm was barely breaking even. $200 might as well be $2,000. After Sarah left, Martha sat at the kitchen table and cried for the first time since her sons had shipped out. Not from sadness, but from pure frustrated exhaustion. She was doing everything right and still losing. The house was falling apart from moisture damage. She was rewashing the same loads over and over, and winter stretched ahead with no end in sight. Thursday morning, the temperature dropped to 0. Martha woke to find her bedroom window completely frosted over from all the moisture she'd put into the house, trying to dry laundry indoors. She scraped the ice away with a kitchen knife and looked out at a world locked in white and grey. The fuel oil dealer wouldn't make deliveries again until next week, and she was trying to conserve what she had. Running the house warm enough to dry laundry would mean running out of heat when it mattered most. She pulled on her husband's old work coat and walked to the barn to tend the livestock. The milk cows stood in their stanchions, their breath creating small clouds in the frigid air. She stripped each cow efficiently, the warm milk hissing into the pail, the rhythm soothing after 3 days of laundry chaos. The barn was warmer than outside, but still cold enough that her fingers ached within minutes. She couldn't feel her toes inside her boots. After milking, she climbed to the hayloft to throw down bales for feeding. The wooden ladder creaked under her weight, the same sound it had made for 30 years. At the top, she stopped. The air was different here. She pulled off one glove and held her bare hand up. Warmth. Actual warmth radiating from somewhere. Martha stood perfectly still, trying to understand what she was feeling. The loft was noticeably warmer than the barn below. Not just a little warmer, significantly warmer, almost comfortable. She walked between the stacked hay bales, and the warmth increased with each step. She placed her palm against a bale and jerked it back. The hay was hot to the touch, almost uncomfortably so. She stood there in the dim light, filtering through the loft boards, her mind racing. Hay generates heat as it cures. Every farmer knew this. Careless farmers who baled hay too wet sometimes had barn fires from spontaneous combustion. Old man Dietrich had lost his entire barn 2 summers ago from exactly that. But properly dried hay, stored correctly with good airflow, created steady warmth without danger. The hay was essentially composting very slowly, and like everything that composts, it gave off heat. Her grandmother's barn in Kansas had clotheslines strung in the hayloft. Martha remembered this suddenly, a memory she hadn't accessed in years. As a child, she'd helped Grandma carry laundry baskets up the ladder, had played hide-and-seek among the hay bales while sheets and pillowcases dried overhead. She'd thought it was just where Grandma kept the lines. She'd never understood it was deliberate, a solution to the exact problem Martha faced now. She descended the ladder so quickly, she almost fell, her boots slipping on the worn rungs. She ran to the house, burst through the kitchen door, and started gathering every piece of wet laundry she'd been fighting with for 3 days. It took 4 trips to carry everything to the barn. Her arms ached by the last one, but she didn't care. She found rope in the machine shed and strung lines between the hay bales, creating a drying space in the warmest section of the loft. The frozen sheets from the chicken coop disaster thawed within 10 minutes. She could actually watch the ice crystals melting, the fabric becoming pliable again. She hung everything she had, 3 full loads, and climbed back down to finish the morning chores. Every hour she found an excuse to check the loft. By noon, the first load was noticeably drier. By 3 in the afternoon, almost dry. By evening, completely dry, the fabric soft and carrying the sweet smell of timothy and clover. Martha took down the dry laundry and carried it to the house through the twilight. The sheets felt warm in her arms, genuinely warm in 0-degree weather. She made up the beds with clean linens and sat at the kitchen table, overwhelmed with relief so intense it made her shake. She'd solved it. 3 days of desperate struggle, and the solution had been 30 yards away the entire time, waiting in the hayloft where her grandmother's wisdom had always known to look. On Friday, Sarah Mitchell stopped by to return a pie plate and saw Martha hanging laundry in the barn loft. By Sunday, Sarah had rope lines strung between her own hay bales. By Wednesday, Emma Schaefer had the system installed. The Bergstrom sisters set up their lines the following week. Within a month, every farm wife in Worth County was drying laundry in her hayloft. The technique spread the way useful information always spread in rural communities, through church socials, party line telephone calls, and women stopping by each other's farms to borrow eggs or return cake pans. By spring, the method had reached farms across Iowa, then jumped into Illinois, Wisconsin, Minnesota. Women who'd struggled with winter laundry for years suddenly had a solution that actually worked. Robert Chen, who farmed 300 acres near Fort Dodge, built permanent drying racks from scrap lumber left over from an old corn crib. His wife loved them so much, he started building racks for neighbors, charging $5 each. By the following winter, he'd sold 40 racks and had orders for 30 more. It gave him something productive to do during the slow months and brought in cash when farm income typically dried up. The county extension agent from Iowa State visited the Henderson farm in March to see the setup for himself. He took photographs and measurements, asked questions about hay temperature and moisture levels, then published a bulletin that summer officially recommending the technique. But most farmers never saw that bulletin. They learned about hayloft drying the old way from neighbors who'd tried it and found it worked. The method succeeded because it solved multiple problems simultaneously. The hay's natural heat provided perfect drying conditions. The moisture from wet laundry kept the hay from becoming too dry and dusty, which meant livestock ate it more readily. Regular trips up to the loft meant farmers checked their hay stacks frequently, catching any dangerous hot spots before they became fire hazards, and the clothes dried gently, without the harsh treatment of wind and sun that wore fabric out faster. Families discovered they could wash more frequently because drying was no longer a bottleneck. Children had cleaner clothes for school. Bedding could be washed every week instead of every month. The improved hygiene meant fewer winter illnesses, especially respiratory problems that plagued farm families living in tight, poorly ventilated houses. Martha Henderson used her hayloft system through the rest of the war years, through both her son's safe return home, through her husband's death from a heart attack in 1958. When she finally sold the farm and moved to town in 1963, the new owners kept the drying racks Robert Chen had built, still solid and functional after 18 years of weekly use. The method remained standard practice on working farms well into the 1970s, when rural electrification reached even remote areas and electric dryers became affordable. But even then, many farm wives kept using the loft occasionally. Electric dryers cost money to run. Hay loft drying was free. And there was something deeply satisfying about using nature's own processes to solve a practical problem, about drying clothes with heat that had once been summer sunshine, stored and released slowly through the cold months when it was needed most. Thank you so much for watching this video about the old farm wisdom that helped American families through difficult times. If you enjoyed learning about this piece of agricultural history, please subscribe to our channel for more stories about traditional farming knowledge and rural American life. Give this video a thumbs up and share it with anyone who appreciates the practical intelligence of our farming ancestors. Your support helps us preserve and share these important memories. This video is inspired by real events and historical farming practices from the 1930s through 1970s. It is not intended to represent or offend any specific individuals or families. Martha Henderson is a representative character who reflects the real experiences of hundreds of American farm wives who discovered and utilized hayloft drying methods during this era, facing similar challenges and finding similar solutions across the rural Midwest and northern farming regions.